Hello, students. Today I'm going to introduce the first read of The Power of the Hero's Journey to you. Let's begin by looking at the learning objectives. So, our learning objective is after an initial reading and discussion of the text, students will be able to identify and restate the text's key ideas and details. So let's go through some of the tabs and then give a little background into the power of the hero's journey. If you haven't already, go ahead and read the introduction and watch the short video on tab 1. That should give you a little bit of background into what it is that you're going to start reading. After that, take a look at tab 2 and complete the vocabulary drag and drop activity. I think there's probably going to be a lot of words that you may not be familiar with, such as apotheosis and archetype. You do not have to do the sample sentences, but at least do the drag and drop to make sure that you are familiar with these terms before you get reading. All right, before we get to the read tab, let me just tell you a little bit of background into this story. The Power of the Hero's Journey. It's really a theory about how adventure stories usually work. So, Joseph Campbell, who you see pictured here, was an influential author and professor, and he created all these theories about mythology and the human psyche that had a profound impact on the fields of literature, psychology, and even in religion. His scholarship focused on what we call comparative mythology, where he would compare the different myths and stories from various cultures. And he looked for shared themes of the human experience in these myths from a variety of cultures. From these, he was able to sort of distill down this theory that every adventure story kind of follows the same pattern. Now, after he came up with this theory, his influence began to spread due to having a documentary TV series that was titled Campbell and the Power of Myth back in the 1980s. And the series was a 6-part series where he had conversations with a journalist where they covered topics such as the creation stories of various religious traditions, as well as what we call the archetype of the hero's journey. The archetype means that it's the basic building blocks. His ideas have also found their way into movies and popular culture. George Lucas, who created Star Wars, used concepts from the hero's journey to write his first Star Wars movie. And usually, what we find in these building blocks is that in the hero's quest, the hero will often meet with like a supernatural aid. In the case of Star Wars, it would have been Obi-Wan Kenobi. And then near the end of the first movie, sorry to give away any spoilers, Obi-Wan Kenobi sacrificed himself in order for Luke Skywalker to become the hero that he was destined to be. And that is part of what we would call the threshold or beginning of transformation in the hero's journey. So that's just one example of how a filmmaker was influenced by this in the writing of his film. Now, you are going to come across in this essay quite a few references to movies, and maybe you're not familiar with them all. They'll be talking about Star Wars, Wizard of Oz, Lord of the Rings, Avatar, Hunger Games, Avengers, and probably a few more films. So if you aren't familiar with these movies, some of what they discuss in this essay may be a little bit confusing. So you're going to have to try to do your best to follow along, even if you're not that familiar with like The Wizard of Oz or The Lord of the Rings. All right, let's get back into the assignment real quick. Going over to the read tab here, I would recommend reading the summary first, which summarizes the article. Now, I do need to tell you that this article is what we call an informative essay, in that it is trying to just describe the hero's journey or inform you about the hero's journey more than it's trying to persuade. This is not an argumentative essay, it is an informative essay. So it does have things like some graphics in here. It shows these little circle bubble graphics with each stage, and then it discusses those stages down here in its body paragraphs one at a time. So make sure that you read through these. Also, the essay itself is not written by Joseph Campbell. It is about Joseph Campbell's work. This is another author by the name of Louise Munson, who is a playwright. She wrote this article describing and explaining Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, and I think she does a pretty effective job at it. Finally, there's really kind of two purposes to this article, not just to explain the hero's journey to the readers, but also to sort of relate the hero's journey to our own everyday lives. And so keep that in mind as you are reading through this, that not only is she talking about this theory about that Joseph Campbell came up about how adventure stories typically work, but that she's also describing a philosophical approach to life. And so think about what the author of this, Louise Munson, is saying about the human journey by looking at this Joseph Campbell's work. So hopefully that makes sense to you. You do have audio here available if you prefer to listen to this. As you are going through, I would suggest highlighting for main ideas and key concepts that stand out to you. And when you are finished reading it, then jump over to tab 4 and complete the reading quiz for this assignment and submit it. I am more than happy to help you if you get lost in this, if you want to talk through the story. But I would also suggest beneath my video, which I haven't embedded yet, I will after this, beneath my video you'll see a series of questions. I would recommend looking through these questions and making sure that you can at least answer them on your own or discuss them with a partner. This should set you up well for the next step in this skill. All right, let me know if I can help you in any way, and I hope that you enjoy this article.